Hello again, this is Charlie Belfontaine, and you are listening to the Chicago Housing Experts bright and early on a Saturday morning.
Believe it or not, even lawyers can make jokes. There's more jokes about us than anyone else. If you like jokes, well, you're not going to like following me on social media because I'm very serious there. But if you're serious about hard-hitting real estate talk, follow me on Instagram, Loftus_Law. Follow me on TikTok, Loftus Law. And go subscribe to my YouTube channel, Loftus Law.
And let me add on to that a little bit. I mean, Patrick is putting together a lot of educational videos.
Oh, God, don't say educational.
Well, they are. Whether you think it's boring or not, you know, the bottom line is when you're buying and selling a house, there's a lot of money involved in this stuff. And the more you know, the more you're worth. All right. The easier it is to make a decision.
God, I wish that was true. I know so much and I'm worth so little.
You're worth a lot to me.
Oh.
But everything is educating yourself so that you can make good home buying or home selling decisions when it comes with this stuff. So getting involved on his, I think your YouTube channel, especially with those shorts, is the biggest thing where you're putting a lot of educational content out there. But even with the TikTok, the Instagram, all the other social medias, you're putting it in there. But we're also focusing on moving all those training classes into the ChicagoHousingExperts.com and get you over onto that learning platform as well. And one way to get yourself on the show when we're recording here is to start asking questions there as well. And we can always bring you right on here if you're interested in that stuff. So the person talking right now, that's me, and my name is Charlie Belfontaine, and I own Chicagoland Home Inspectors. Usually I don't introduce my business till a little bit later on, but same thing. When it comes to common issues that we find in houses, I think this is important. Now, we don't have Steve or Joey with us, two of our other experts. They're a little bit busy today. But one thing that was coming up, and we had a really good discussion, and I want to go into more detail on this, is lawsuits that have happened across the country, and mostly it's lawsuits due to failure to disclose. And I got a beef with this, all right, because every time I look at these disclosure forms, they're all almost say the exact same thing. You know, I lived here for 12 months, and I don't know anything else about anything wrong in the house. And when we send our guys in there to do the inspection, some of the stuff is so obvious that we just keep painting over water damage or whatever. You know it's here. And then when you keep fixing the result of the problem, that doesn't help much, and nobody fixes the cause of the problem. But I guess I'm just going off the sidetrack, because obviously when I get emotional about something, I just go blah, 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 blah. But seriously, if you could, Patrick, if you could please tell us how some of these disclosures went and how the judges and why the judges ruled. I want to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that it is the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of sellers is, you know, the less I have to tell a buyer, the better off I am, right?
I think they're getting that advice from the real estate agents.
I don't think they're being told exactly that. I think the real estate agents, by and large, take a hands-off approach when it comes to the disclosures, because they don't want to be implicated in whatever the consequences are of making or not making. So, you know, what's going to happen? If something goes wrong and then the fingers start flying, we start pointing and trying to assign blame. And the way that flows is downhill, as we're all accustomed to. You know, whenever a stinky thing rolls, it typically
store high and transport.
That's
where the acronym came from.
It's not. I did Google that, and you are mistaken.
I'm never wrong.
That is an old wives' tale. Am I allowed to say that still, or is
old wives' tale? Yes, because I'm an old wife.
Okay. Oh, well, no, but that means you can say it, but I can't.
Oh, okay. Anyway, focus. I disrupted you.
That's okay. You know, so you get the buyer. They go, this bad thing happened. Hey, seller, you should have said that. And the seller immediately points their finger at the realtor, and they go, well, the realtor said I didn't have to. And then you know, now everyone is implicated, and it's all problematic. So because realtors, managing brokers don't trust realtors to be able to really evaluate that with any kind of thoughtfulness. They just go, give them the document, tell them to fill it out. You have no advice other than be truthful and honest. And that is a very safe approach if you are trying to avoid any and all liability, is to just do nothing. Because
Safe approach on the real estate agent.
well, in general, the law doesn't really impose a lot of affirmative duties on people. It's more, you more have a duty to not cause harm. You don't have a duty to save someone from incurring harm. And so lawyers who are trying to figure out the thing that's not going to get them sued, the lawyers from the insurance companies hired by the realtors insurers, they're going to say, look, I can't account for the intelligence of all the realtors out there, so I'm going to give really the most basic of advice, which is to don't affirmatively go out of your way to assist someone in completing these disclosures, because you may inadvertently assume a duty not to harm by affirmatively going out and doing that thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
I
does that leave
gotta
a seller?
say, I did have, when I sold a condo one time, I actually had the real estate agent fill out the form for me.
Well,
Yeah.
interesting.
And I didn't ask them to. They just did it. Here you go. Here's the form. Here's all your paperwork. Sign here.
Advice given is not always advice taken.
Yeah.
Is how I would.
I didn't feel comfortable, but there wasn't
Nah, it's
really
weird.
anything that was wrong. So I guess I didn't care. But I just asked, like, well, how much do we want to put on there? And it was explained to me that you don't really want to tell people all the bad things about the house, because you need them to fall in love with it before you tell them what's wrong with it. And I just,
That's your job,
it doesn't
realtor.
sit, no, it doesn't sit well with me. I kind of asked the same thing about why don't we see a lot of pre-listing inspections? Why don't we have sellers, hire professionals to go out there to do, an inspection and fix some of these things before they become a problem afterwards? And that same thing came up, and on the West Coast, that's common. But here in Chicago, it's just not a thing.
Look, I'm sure realtors will disagree with what I'm about to say, and go ahead. We can talk about it. But
Yeah.
by the time someone makes an offer on a home, if they're not in love, they're definitely infatuated, right? So there's your opportunity to let them in on some of the warts, some of the issues, because now listen, you can hope for the best, and what I often say is hope is not a strategy. Okay, so
point.
you can hope and hope and hope, and I hope it works out for you, but you don't need me, you don't need a realtor, you don't really need anyone to just employ a hope. I don't want to call it a strategy, but employ hope as your main tactic. So it's like, okay, so how are we going to take this thing that someone is on their way to falling in love with and make sure that they are aware of at least the things that the law imposes a duty on me as a seller to disclose, right? So, at the end of the day, there's the sales aspect of it, which is, I think, what any realtor is going to be talking about when they're talking about getting someone to fall in love with a home. Mm-hmm. But then, this is not it's not a candy bar. It's not even a car. It's a home, and you don't necessarily have the same kind of duty to a person buying a candy bar, other than to not poison the candy bar or whatever. It's a much lower stakes sort of sale. With real estate, it's regulated. There are required disclosures, and not only that, but the law at common law imposes certain duties on people in addition to, or perhaps maybe I'm saying it the wrong way around. You've got common law duties to disclose things that you know about, that the buyer may not be able to discover on their own, if you're aware or should be aware. We can get into what that means and some examples as we go on. But you also have this Residential Real Estate Disclosure Act and the accompanying report that's set forth in the act, and you've got, I think it's 24 questions that you have to answer. Have you lived there in the last 12 months? And then are you aware of any defects in these other 23 items of that represent parts of the home? And yeah, I mean, look, it's when people fill that out, I mean, I don't think they give it a lot of thought. They go, I don't remember having any of that stuff. So they just, XXX, sign it, and, hey, probably going to be okay. We're probably going to be fine. And experience will tell most real estate professionals that probably will be fine. As a percentage of the real estate transactions, the number of lawsuits that get filed is fairly low. But, and here's the big but, I'm allowed to say that, right? Devin hates me. If that goes wrong, okay, the consequences are quite high, right? We're talking in the six figures, easily, and also paying someone else's lawyer if you find yourself in a bad spot. And, especially if you're getting into, and look, real estate values these days, it's more as the value of real estate increases, the viability of filing lawsuits as a result of failing to disclose is also going to increase, because the economics is going to start to line up better. If you're buying a $150,000 home, chances are you don't have the kind of liquidity necessary to pay a lawyer to go after the seller.
Yep.
Okay. You're not going to find a lot of those homes out there these days. A starter house, right, is probably going to run you about $500,000. If you've got the dough to put 20% down on a $500,000 house, assuming it's not all of your dough, you're going to be in a better position to pursue a seller who left you with a lemon. Will we see more of these types of litigation? Possibly. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing things out there, and we'll see. I'm not someone with a crystal ball. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here.
I mean, when I take things and everything that I'm listening to what you say, and I'm going to simplify it, I think if you don't try to deceive somebody, that can pretty much keep you out of trouble. I mean, if you don't know about something, and I want to dig deeper on the disclosure form, because I'm really liking this as a seller. Let's just say, for example, I got a crack in the basement, and I got water coming in the basement, and I go to the store and I buy, like a dry lock paint or some sort of quick dry cement or something, and I paint over this, or I schmooey the mortar on there, and I think I got it fixed. All right. Do I have to disclose that there's a leak in my basement if I think I fixed it?
Yeah, so we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty when you talk about
this is a big deal.
This particular topic. So as far as, do I need to disclose things that I believe are fixed? The answer is maybe. Okay. And,
I hate maybe.
Well, I'm a lawyer. I don't have any yes or no answers for most questions.
Depends. I always say depends.
Just like what you put on every morning when you get out of bed.
This is why nobody likes you.
Devin hates that too. I'm gonna keep saying his name whenever I say something
Disclosures.
untoward. Look, and the case law, it draws a distinction between things you fixed, right? Like if you fixed, let's use water, because the water seems to be a common one that
it is a big issue.
Well, it is a big issue. If water's coming in and you just paint over, and you think, well, it doesn't look bad anymore, and even if you believe in your heart of hearts that's sufficient, it ain't. It just isn't, because most normal people realize that you have to stop water at its source. Right? You have to eliminate the water from where it is finding its way into your home, not just put a bit of caulk there and hope for the best, right? I mean, and I'm speaking very generally, obviously.
Of course.
But, specific to the example that you provided, the fix for that problem is not some paint.
Is not what?
Is not some paint.
Okay.
Even fancy paint. All right. The solution is, where is this coming from, and how is it finding its way down into this crack? All right. Once you have fixed the source of the water, then you might decide either for aesthetics or as a fail-safe, like a second line of defense. Yeah, I'm going to put something up to seal this crack. But the crack in and of itself isn't causing the water to come in. It is coming from somewhere else. So if you stop at fixing the cosmetic issue, I wouldn't even call it fixing. If you're just treating the symptoms and not the cause, you're going to find yourself in a difficult spot if you find yourself in court.
But a lot of people don't know this. Just for example, I had the same conversation, and the phrases that I use is they're fixing the result of the problem, all right, but they're not fixing the cause of the problem. And for example, we had a chimney that discharges gas appliances, so furnace, water heater, and so forth. It was a clay tile, and you could just tell by the water stains around the brick that it was probably broken inside that clay tile flue. It was also an external chimney, and we're not supposed to put 80% furnaces inside of an external chimney in a clay tile flue line, right? So what happened was the furnace and water heater kept going in there for many years. It damaged the clay tile. It started damaging the brick. The homeowners ended up paying a large amount of money to rebuild that entire chimney. So they redid the bricks, put all new brick, mortar, everything else, hired a professional to do this, but they still didn't put a flue liner in there to prevent future gases from getting to the brick and doing the damage over again. All right, so it's not finished yet, but the homeowner believed it's finished. Is this something that they might get in trouble for?
Possibly. I mean, this one, this one's right there on the razor's edge, right? So it's like if you separate the idea of, did they fix the actual issue? If you were to like take it and put it in a vacuum sealed container, I think the result you would arrive at is, sorry, homeowner, that's a you problem. You should have disclosed that. And let me, as a quick aside, and then I'll tell you what I would have done in that situation if I were the seller getting sued over that. But this is why I like a strategic disclosure. All right. So
I need to know what that means.
Well, what does that mean? It's like if you had water at some point coming in and you fixed it and you believe you fixed it to, that you fixed the source of it. Right. If you disclose we had water at some point, we believe that the problem has been fixed, haven't had water since. Going to be really hard for a buyer to come back and say you did not disclose that at one point you had water coming in that basement. It really kneecaps the argument that, hey, you never told me about the potential for water. Now, let me quickly go back to the example you gave, which is I think the water one it works well because it leads me to easier answers to that question of how do I know I've gone to the source. With the water, it's like you go and you find where the water's coming in. Not always easy to do that, but I think it's a pretty well established this is how you fix that issue. With what you're describing, I do think that it's more technical. I think in that situation you would essentially pass the blame on to the chimney company that you hired. All right. As a home buyer, whatever you did, right, you did because of their advice. They told you this is what the solution was. They're the ones that put you in that position. You will file a third-party complaint against them, bring them in as a defendant, and let them defend what they did. And
right, but I think I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm trying to think of myself as what would the mason do if you came in there and go, whoa, your chimney was deteriorated. All I do is the brick on the outside. I didn't scope the inside. I don't know the damages of that. I didn't, the whole venting and vent liner, that's a heating contractor. You just paid me to fix the brick, and I did.
Well, you could make that argument. We'll see how well that holds up in court.
Well, you got experience in court. Where do you think that this would come by? What would the judge say? I want a guarantee.
Which judge are you putting me in front of? Is it a judge that has, is it a mechanics lien judge or a judge that's handled mechanics lien cases? I might like that judge to have a better sense of the nuance of, what contractors are responsible for what and whether or not that contractor had a duty to go to that next step of saying, I can rebuild this, but it still is not going to be right. That judge might get one result. If you get a judge who has really only spent their whole career at the state's attorney's office, which a huge number of them, that's where they come from. That's how you end up becoming a judge in a lot of respects. And maybe has only ever really seen criminal cases, or maybe they spent some time in traffic and then they went to foreclosure court and then landlord tenant and then up to divorce. I mean, are they going to be able to draw from their own personal experience or their legal experience the notion of what exactly that mason was supposed to do or not? I think that's less likely. So and this goes into I cannot even begin to tell you how many people I have talked out of going to court by sort of describing some of the very real pitfalls of the justice system is the best one we got, but it ain't great, unfortunately. And at the end of the day, gosh, I don't want to completely ruin my own reputation, but anyone that did well in law school is not probably going to end up being a judge, at least not a state court judge, because they don't make enough. If you went to a top 14 law school and you got a job at a big law firm, you're darn near as a first year associate making what a judge makes.
I think a lot of that.
How are you ever going to go and downgrade your income to go be a judge? You're not. It's never going to happen. So who do you end up getting? You get the C students.
Okay.
I'm
a C student, so you talk nicely about them. All right. I like being that.
I mean, if Charlie Bellefontaine is my judge, I'm settling.
There it is. But no, let's take that, because that brings up a very interesting point. There was a situation where I was an expert witness, which I don't know why they chose me, but whatever, they did. And it was a high-end home in Winnetka. They ended up getting transferred to Italy, the people that were selling this. So they decided, and it was a brand new construction home, they decided to rent it out because they knew they were going to be gone for a year or so. They come back, and the people they rented it to had a couple dogs, and you could just see that the carpet everywhere in the carpeting in the basement was urinated all over the place. There was signs all over the wood floors, stairs, everything else. The place in 1 year really took a beating. Now, we use stuff like black lights to go ahead and photograph this is how much it is and try and give a big picture and identify where everything is. The judge didn't allow that because we didn't take a clip of the carpeting and send it to a laboratory to get a DNA sample to prove it was that dog that was inside that house. And to me, it's like, who cares which dog it is? If I'm going to be living in some house, don't I have some sort of a duty to make sure whether it's me or my dog or whatever is not peeing all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, that really goes toward the rules of evidence. So, it's not really for this show.
No, but I guess an attorney should know that stuff anywhere. But I guess where I'm going is, you were talking about educating the judge earlier about certain situations. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was trying to go to. So how, what are like the most important things that we have to get through on the real estate transaction in order to get the judge to understand what the expectations, I think that's the right word, expectations are?
I'm not thinking that granular down the line, because here's the thing. I don't want to end up in front of a judge. If I've ended up in front of a judge, there was some tactical error at some point. Look, sometimes you just don't know. A seller, they could just as easily be dishonest with me as they are with anyone else in the transaction. So if that's what happens, well, we don't really get to the point of being strategic or tactical about it. I'm just sort of being, we're hoping at that point, right? I have not been, my analytical skills have not been activated. So
Well, nobody wins.
but so that's why we're talking about these disclosures and what is relevant. What should we be thinking about when we're talking about, when we're trying to decide what to tell the buyer and what not to tell the buyer. In general, I'm probably going to err on the side of disclosing something, just because if the disclosure is made honestly, you've really created a big problem for a buyer that wants to come back and say you were dishonest or you didn't tell me about something.
Now you're making my argument.
So, and look, it's when I say, my inclination is to disclose. It's not always the case. We don't always need to disclose. We don't have to be, honest to the point of harming ourselves, right? So if someone says, sump pump failed 20 years ago, and when I owned the home,
nuts,
and it's
it?
been bone dry ever since. Just to use kind of a really easy to evaluate example.
But I always thought that disclosure form when it came to water seepage is active. It uses the word active. Am I mistaken on that? You see them every day. I don't.
Oh, I don't remember.
Okay.
I see it every day, but if I was going to refresh my recollection as to what it exactly says, I'd go look at the thing.
I got it. Do that.
So, whether it says active or not, if you've got a finished basement
Or current,
whatever it says. I mean, if you've got a finished basement, you're guessing as much as anyone else. And so if in that finished basement there are signs of something's going on here, and certainly if you have made repairs in the past, on more than one occasion, even more so, I get it. You just want to get out. You want to sell the place. You want to. Great. I want to help you do that, but I also don't want you to have a 4-year court fight after closing because the buyer feels some kind of way about it. And again, I made this point earlier, but I'll make it again. The higher the price, the more likely you're looking at the possibility of that, because those the people with higher net worth are more able to afford to pay a lawyer to pursue a remedy.
Yeah, I guess everything is relative, isn't it? It's if there's some people that are going to think that $20 is not a lot of money. And there's other people that think $20 is a very considerable amount of money,
True.
So, and now we get to the, I can use $20 and I could use $100,000. There's people that don't think that's a lot of money either. So it's all relative to the different person. So that I do understand where it comes with this. But, I also look at it, it's kind of, to me, it's just, I don't know, I call it the red face test. It just doesn't seem right if I'm trying to, deceive someone. But on that same note, I go back to, well, yeah, it did leak, but I fixed it. And why should I have to go ahead and make this as a problem? Especially, I'm going to bash on home inspectors right now. If we didn't have such a weak population in our profession, there's a lot of guys that won't comment on that stuff. If they think it's not active, they won't even put it in the report. Where I want our guys to put even the old stuff that's in there. And this is, going again, the part that I'm just having trouble. My brain just won't work right, I guess, on this one. Why not just get it out in the open? Why not just tell the people that says, yes, we had a water leak here. This is what it was. I hired this company. We put injected epoxy in here, or we put a perimeter drain tile in here. We haven't had water since, and here's the receipts. To me, it just seems like the right thing to do.
I mean, you're operating in some alternate universe where people's primary objective is to be fair, and unfortunately, that is not. Whenever you're talking about, and this isn't strictly business, but a real estate transaction it's a business transaction.
It is.
Once you get into business, people's minds kind of shift away from whatever it is that they view as fair and just. When you're talking about buying and selling something, they get into wheeler dealer mode, and it's like, how do I cut the best deal possible for myself?
Or even worse, how can I get the most money from this person?
Well,
doesn't matter if I deserve it.
There's also a lot of fear, right? So people who are in the sale portion of a transaction are likely either already in a purchase transaction or they are looking toward being in a purchase transaction. They've already spent that money that they think in their heads. They've already spent that money that they think they're going to get from the sale. And so what does that lead them to do? If the fear is, okay, either I'm going to have to give a bunch of money to a buyer to satisfy their concerns, that's an L. I'd rather take my chances as a seller. Not my recommendation. By and large, when you disclose something that is, sure, this is a thing that regularly happens to homeowners when they own, and I did what was necessary to fix it. Now you've short-circuited their ability to say you didn't tell me about that, or you omitted that, or you lied about it.
So what advice would you give a seller then? What should they document in a couple of the items? How detailed should I go into that?
Enough to where you're not leaving out important things. And I know that's not a satisfying answer, perhaps.
No, it isn't.
Because
not for me.
Unfortunately, this is going to be largely fact-based. And so, I'm always going to be at that point. Look, I'm your advocate. I'm not trying to give your money away either. Let's be quite clear about that. The way that disclosure is going to be written is going to be in the least. I'm going to be telling you the least amount of information that is going to give you enough that I can say I didn't withhold or lie about it. And that's just my job as the seller's lawyer. And that's another reason why I'm apt to disclose something, especially if I can describe it truthfully, in a way that is, I don't think, going to harm the transaction. I think that there's nothing but advantages.
Is that part of your duties as an attorney for a seller to go over the disclosure form with them?
No.
No.
That's already been filled out. That's already done and dusted. By the time the contract comes to me, it's already been presented. It's already been filled out by the seller, and it's already been presented to the buyer.
When do you meet the seller?
When do I meet the seller?
Yeah, when are you introduced to the seller? What process?
Oh, I mean after they accept an offer.
After they accept an offer?
Yeah, typically.
But to me, there seems like there's so much stuff that they could be prepared to do before they get to that point. I mean, don't you? I don't know. You're almost taking legal advice from a real estate agent, it seems like.
Not necessarily. I mean, most realtors aren't, as we said earlier, going to help you with that form. They're just going to say, here, fill this out.
Well, I don't want to tell you. I told you already that I had one fill it out for me. And I hear this a lot from my clients or even from sellers. My agent told me to do this, and even with, I'll go back to the, I'm flashback in here to my divorce. I'm going to go all trigger mode. I remember that my ex-wife was lying on the stand, and because we were going to the semi-court portion, so I'm doing pro se. I don't know what it's called. You have like an actual trial in front of the judge. I guess that's actual court. And I was doing pro se, so I got to ask her the questions. Well, why did you put this down when you know it's not true? Because my attorney told me. And I go, did you tell your attorney that it was true? Yeah. And he told me to put it down this way anyway. It's right there in front, and I'm like, all right, Your Honor, I like to remove blah, 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 doing all my motion stuff like that. And, it's just, I don't get it. There's just, people that they think it's normal to be dishonest, whether it's a real estate agent, seller, attorney, home inspector, whomever,
That's true.
radio show producer, whoever, we'll go ahead and point the fingers at everybody. And I guess the biggest thing about this whole process is to find somebody that are going to protect you from the evil.
Yeah. Look, there's no silver bullet. There's no 100% like, if I do it just this way, I'll never be bamboozled. I'll never have a problem. I mean, life doesn't work like that.
In fact, I just said that today. I was responding to a Google review that a client left for us, and he was one of these big long ones, right? And ecstatic, everything else, and he did this. They didn't miss a thing, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, whoa, we're not perfect. We do not find everything, And the whole idea is I try to take steps in running our business so we do reduce the chances of missing stuff, but no home inspector catches everything. And I do not want to mislead anybody
until they invent X-ray vision. That is an impossible standard for you to meet. So,
but even there's some things that are visible. I mean, we're talking about the water signs. I see past repairs and everything else. But if it's dry today and it's not presenting itself today, I can't tell you if it's going to leak in the future.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's not a perfect situation. It's a home is an incredibly complex structure, and there are things you just cannot see.
But part of what we do as professionals is we help people reduce their risk.
Right.
We can't eliminate them, but we could reduce them.
Risk mitigation. There is not risk elimination, to be absolutely sure.
We should be pushing to have. I mean, well, how do you feel about that? If a seller came to you and wanted coaching on filling out the disclosure form or something like that, would you do it as part of the seller's attorney? If you got to the person early on.
If someone had a specific question, I would use my knowledge and understanding of the case law to advise them, hey, if you did experience water, it happens. I mean, there's even if it's a current problem, I mean, you get a lot more out of being more forthright with those conditions than trying to be deceptive or to cover them up or whatever.
It's never the crime. It's always lying about the crime.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. It's again, you want to take into consideration that you have certain legal duties to make disclosures, and that opens you up to potential liability. And what we're trying to do with our strategy is to mitigate that as much as possible. How do we do that? We don't give them an avenue to say that you knew or should have known about this thing by making a disclosure, a tactically made disclosure that tells them what we are obligated to tell them. We don't have to get into the nitty gritty. If you have a sewer backup, you don't have to describe exactly what came back through. Okay. I'll give you a quick example that I can think of. I had a client who was selling a home that had a sewer backup of a sanitary sewer. And it's funny because I remember when they were telling me about it, it was 4th of July weekend 2 years ago. And the reason it sticks in my mind is because that was the first NASCAR race. You remember how much rain we got?
A lot.
And so when they told me that, I put two and two together. I'm like, we got a heck of a lot of rain. I should probably point that out to the buyer so that they have context. I mean, they said this was the only time they'd ever had a sewer backup during the time that they owned the property. So I did a little, Googling or whatever. And if I'm not mistaken, we had more rain on that Saturday in one day than ever in one day in Chicago.
Wow.
It was a historically wet day. Okay, now that's kind of taking things one step further to say, look, now if they get a sewer backup, if that buyer gets a sewer backup, 6 weeks after closing, what are they going to say? You never told us that the sewer backs up? Well, I'm sorry, but we did. And so we've strategically avoided that future possibility of them coming back and saying you didn't live up to your legal duty. But also we mitigate the impact of that by saying, look, it only happened once, and it took the wettest day on record in Chicago to make it happen. All right?
I think that's the right thing to do.
No, none of that is untrue.
Yeah.
Do I know that it will take an equally wet day for another sewer backup to happen? I don't.
You don't.
I don't, and no one does. You know, I'm not telling any tall tales. I'm not sticking anyone's neck out there. I'm just saying these are the facts.
So I did have a home buyer in another state reach out to me for, expectation advice and stuff like that. And it was actually pretty interesting because it's directly related to exactly what you're talking about right now. They ended up buying a house. The person who sold the house told them that they have the house or the sewer line rotted. They actually coached them on how to recognize it. You're going to see that the flushing slows down. You're going to hear gurgling that comes in here. That's your clue that tells you that the roots need to be rotted out again. And here's a plumber that went ahead and does this stuff. And they charged him $288, which I thought was a very cheap price.
Sounds about right.
To go ahead, sounds about right. Sounds cheap. Usually they go a lot more than that. But then the plumber is also, that's one of the drawbacks. And I will give this. Whenever you start getting a really good discount for a sewer scope or a rotting or something like that, I assure you it's a lost leader. All right. The plumber that's coming on, and what I mean by lost leader is they're hoping to get bigger work out of you, and they just want to get in the door so that they could try and get more stuff.
Oh, if I was a plumber and I had someone come in and I had someone call me out to their home and they had clay tile sewer line, absolutely, I want to be their guy for the inevitable when some branch goes and crashes through it, and now I've got to dig up their lawn for $20K.
Yeah.
So fair enough. That's real smart if you ask me.
It is business as long as it's legitimate. But in this situation, This whole root thing has been going on for a bunch of years, and they're telling them they need the new sewer line now. Otherwise, you're gonna, and they're fear mongering them into this stuff. And
they won't be disappointed with the new sewer line because they won't have to get the thing rotted every 6 months, but it's also a big dent in the old pocketbook.
And that's where I was going. So fixing in our area, the going rate to fix one collapse, one zone or whatever, is typically around $5,000 or $6,000. All right. If they have to replace the entire sewer line, depending on how long that is, you could be in the 30s, if not more, easily.
If you get into the street and it's the city involved.
Yeah, because now once you cut open that street, now the permits alone get stupidly expensive because somebody's got to repair that street, and it's not going to be your plumber. Whatever the municipality that's responsible for the streets and the curbs, those are the people that go ahead and fix it. You just pay the bill.
Right. They have their guy who's been. He got his 20 years in, and now he's in Streets and Sand. Now he's got his own LLC. They call him in, whatever he charges to fix that street. Now you're paying him. It's, you gotta love the city of Chicago, man.
Well, I'm not going that much there, and I'm not going to start getting into, I don't even know what the right word is, but conflict of interest and stuff like that. And I am a wimp, and that's okay with it.
He doesn't want to get out there and tell it like it is, Charlie. Come on.
It is what it is. All right. But the point, so I'm trying to get to this buyer, he wants to go back and sue the seller for $30,000. And I'm like, well, wait a minute here. They told you that they have it rotted. They even told you how to recognize when it's time to get it rotted. They told you how often they get it rotted, which is every year or two. Now, and you know how much it cost to get it rotted. So you're going to say that you would rather pay $20-something thousand today as opposed to paying $288 every year to go ahead and keep this clean. It was a hard thing for me to understand. But once I laid it out like that, he was actually pretty open with it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, yeah, I mean, they talk to the contractor, and the contractor has a certain point of view because
They want to make money.
Well,
And some people just want to take all your money and empty your pocketbooks. I'm sorry.
See,
Now
this is
I'm getting all.
Mr. Controversial here.
Yeah.
He's happy to crap all over all the plumbers in Chicago area. So
Because I had bad run-ins with a few of them
take
trying
note-
to sell my clients stuff they don't need.
take note. I am team plumber. Charlie hates plumbers.
I don't hate plumbers. I hate dishonest plumbers.
Charlie loves the government. He loves
I
inspectors.
actually do like my government.
Oh God,
Yeah.
you would. You would.
I am
Upper
very
middle
happy where
class white guy loves the government. Yeah, when you get pulled over, you got no worries.
No, I know I'm going to get a ticket. I got no worry about it. If I get pulled over, I probably did something wrong and well deserved it.
No, you have to argue and fight so that I can get the body cam footage and then shame you online.
And how much do I have to pay to have you shame me online? What are those fees for attorneys?
It's actually the cost is for me to just keep that hush hush.
Ah, there it is. So there's the extortion line on this whole stuff.
You can't arrest me. I'm Charlie Moneybags Belfontaine.
No,
I live in Wilmette.
Oh boy, this is no good. Is coming.
I have
from this.
orange appliances.
I like my orange appliances. I like them a lot. I got a new orange fridge too, by the way.
That's right. He's got an orange fridge, and he found another one on Marketplace. And so now he's got mini me orange fridge to store his beer next to his garage urinal.
That I absolutely do. But it goes back to.
What do I have to disclose about the garage urinal?
There is no urinal in my garage.
That's not what I hear.
So if there's any attorneys listening and you could somehow help me, file a lawsuit against Patrick Loftus over here to make him stop saying that I have a urinal in my garage, I will gladly pay you on contingency.
Govern yourself accordingly.
Exactly that. No, but how many times? I mean, we have a lot of real estate transactions. And I know it's got to be less than 0.1%, but how often do lawsuits actually happen? And you did use a term earlier, and we are running short on time, and I know I got a bad habit at this, so I want you to answer this one first. What does it mean? You used the term case law. What is case law?
Yeah, case law is when a case is decided at the trial court level. So basically when you file a lawsuit, and you do all the discovery, you hand over what you got, you do the depositions where you get to, ruin your case for your lawyer. You go and you have a trial, and then the judge or the jury makes their decision. That's the end of the trial court portion. You've offered all your evidence. You basically, that's your opportunity to make all of your points and hope to win. All right. Now, if you don't like the result, you can appeal. And when you appeal, you don't get to bring anything new in. You just get to say things like the trial court judge misapplied the law, or the law should be something different. The first one is an easier. I mean, they're all appealing is a tough one to win, but that's all of the reasons I explained why the judges may not always get it right, and just rewind on your dial to get to that point, because I'm not going to ruin my reputation twice in 1 hour. You have the opportunity to appeal. So you take all of your facts that you think apply, and you take all of the law that you think applies and that the judge should have taken into consideration, or if you think the law should be changed, whatever it is, and you take it up to the appellate level. And usually this is a 3-judge panel that sits and hears your appeal. Now, in many cases, not all, well, put it this way, each case will be decided with a written opinion. And they're all kind of written the same way. You've got an intro that if you're short on time, you can just read that bit, and that'll tell you, what the dispute was, what the decision was, and that's it.
Okay.
And then they'll go into the facts. Then they'll tell you what the law is, and then they'll apply to the facts to the law, and then the conclusion being either we affirm or we send it back, or whatever it is. When you talk about case law, so not all of those written opinions are published. And they're published in the sense that you can get your hands on them. But if there's a U at the end of the case number, is considered unpublished, at least here in Illinois, and then it can't be cited as binding precedent. Now, they recently slightly changed that, but the worst thing in the world is when you're trying to write a brief. Thank God I don't do that too much anymore, but you find it's the perfect case, just the perfect case to cite. Like, the facts are just so dead on. The appellate court judge said exactly what you would have liked them to say, and then you see that there's a U at the end of the case number, and you can't find any other good cases that are just like it. And you're just like, it just makes you crazy. The bane of every third-year associate's existence is these unpublished opinions, especially when they go your way. But so with the published opinions, the one without the U, those are the, when we talk about stare decisis, you got to follow the law that exists. That's what we're talking about. So when I read a case, you take the facts and you go, all right, so how is this similar to my set of facts? How is this not similar? And that's, as time goes on, more cases get decided, and you have more and more advisory, texts as far as the cases. So that's when we talk about case law. That's the case law, if you will.
And let me repeat just to make sure I understand. So you go to court, trial happens, judges rule, things are written, an appeal has to happen, and confirm or deny. And there cannot be a U after the number. That is a case law.
Yeah, that's part of the binding case law, if you will.
It has to have an appeal process. So just a normal court case with no appeal, that would not be part of case law. Is that a fair statement or not correct? We're not 100%.
I'm gonna say yes, just because the nuance of it is not really worth getting into for your average person that's not actually pursuing these types of things. But so by and large, the case is decided by the appellate court, and then you can also appeal. If you don't like what happened at the appellate court, you can appeal to the Supreme Court. You have an automatic right to appeal to the appellate court. The right to appeal to the Supreme Court, you can appeal. They don't have to take your case, and they take very few cases.
Interesting.
What the Supreme Court is trying to do is, if there's a split in the districts, so there's 5 districts here in Illinois, if one district has decided an issue one way, another district has decided an issue another way. For example, can I stop a car because I smell burnt cannabis versus unburnt cannabis? Actually, the answer is no for burnt cannabis. It's yes for unburnt cannabis, believe it or not. And I won't get into all the details on that because you just showed me the number 2. But yeah, it's a thing that all lawyers are kind of like, what? So that's when you get boomers deciding these cases and they don't really get cannabis, and they think that that's a distinction to make.
Wait a minute, I'm a boomer and I get cannabis because it's legal in this state.
It is, and that's
I
why
like it.
That's why unburnt cannabis, actually, because there are extra. Once you burnt the cannabis, it ain't, that's it. It's done, right? But the unburnt cannabis, you're supposed to store it in an airtight compartment that can't let any of the smells out. Which, by the way, there is none. There is no such thing in existence that humankind has invented. So it's already an impossible standard. And what it ends up doing is it gives police the ability to say, okay, the state attorney's gonna coach the cop. Did you smell burnt cannabis or unburnt cannabis? I smell burnt. No. Did you smell burnt cannabis or unburnt cannabis? Unburnt cannabis. Cool. We got a good stop.
We are running out of time on all this stuff, and I do want to encourage anybody, if you're thinking about selling your home or buying your home, and you want to start getting prepped for, what is going to happen and learn as much as you can. We have just started building this platform at ChicagoHousingExperts.com. I'd like to encourage everybody to join up on there. It is free. You are going to have full access to Patrick, Steve, Joey, myself.
Not full access.
Well, not full access, but you can ask questions out there in the open. We will be there to answer those questions for you. But we do need to close up. Patrick, if you don't mind, give us your contact info again, please.
Folks, don't smoke and drive. That is my official stance on this.
Thank you.
Find me for all of your law needs, specifically real estate, especially if you're selling your house. Find me on social media. on Instagram, Loftus_law. On TikTok, Loftus Law. Follow me on YouTube. I'm putting up more long-form content these days, Loftus Law. Just follow me. I'm fun to follow.
Well, there's a lot to learn. There really is.
Man, I have only scratched the surface, baby.
I like to hear that. So I'm sorry we're missing Joey and Steve. We do keep their contact information out there. So please, if you have any questions, again, ChicagoHousingExperts.com. Thank you, Devin Tingle, for making everything work over here.